Hi, I'm Benjamin Taylor from RedQuadrant and the Public Service Transformation Academy. And this is part of a series of interviews we're doing with people right on the inside of local government reorganisation and devolution to talk about the real challenges and the practicalities of getting through this effectively and serving our communities better. And I'm really pleased to be joined today by Greg Campbell, who's Strategic Director of Rochford and Brentwood, who are obviously going through LGR very soon. Greg, I'd love to hear a bit about you to get us going. You've obviously got very direct experience of working across and bringing councils together with Rochford and Brentwood, which is a success story of partnering and sharing. I notice you're also an LGA peer reviewer, so you've been around the country and seen a lot of stories of different councils thriving or failing to thrive. So it sounds as though you've got a lot of broad experience of leadership under pressure in local government. Tell me a bit about that and about your background, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Benjamin. And delighted to be doing this with you. So broad experience, really, going back a number of years, always been involved in transformation, project management, taking on some of those really big meaty projects where you're changing, really making a big difference in what you're doing. And I was fortunate enough to be part of Brentwood when we pulled this partnership together with Rochford. So I'm now Brentwood and Rochford. And bringing them together was a unique partnership. If you don't know the story, we're not bound by borders. We have something we refer to as the Basildon buffer between the two authorities. So there's a few miles between us. So it made it really a useful link because actually both authorities knew they were going to retain their sovereignty. And that's quite important from the start, which made some of the connections between the two authorities easier. But we did go through a lot of change. We set out a really good plan. It was a hard plan, driven right from the top by the leaders, by the members who are fully involved. And I can't endorse when you're doing all these changes. I think anyone else has been it, making sure there's buy-in all the way. And I'll probably touch on communication a few times about how vital that is when you're making change. But there's the experience we've had with those two authorities, made change, one chief exec, one set of senior officers, made changes to a number of the services, putting in, I think, good infrastructure. They haven't all come together. It's about choosing the right ones, working with the right set of people and the right set of services. So we've definitely brought things where we can jointly use insurance, finance, some of those areas, some of the contact centre support systems. IT, whilst all the systems are not completely embedded, and that would be difficult, actually a lot of the platforms now are. And there were some of the big wins that we got to go through. And it was working really with the staff to make sure it happens, because there was obviously a lot of concern when that came through. And you can take these experiences and now you multiply them with LGR. And it's really interesting. You're getting the same, again, anxiety, concern about what's happening with that coming together. It makes it also difficult because Brentwood and Rochford are actually going to go split, decouple, and actually end up in two different unitaries. Brentwood will end up in the mid-Essex and Rochford will end up in the south-east unitary, which is fine, but we need to do some internal working as well. And we need to make sure that staff are in the best position that they can be moving forward for the two new unitaries. That's a bit of flavour for me. Is that enough? I can probably go into a bit more.
Well, let's get into what's. I mean, so you've set out the experience and also some of the challenge ahead, and that decoupling is going to be particularly painful, I imagine, given all the pride and success that had gone into that. It takes me back a little bit, actually, to my days when I was at the start supporting the strategic alliance between Staffordshire Moorlands and High Peak, which has, succeeded to this day, continued to this day, and where obviously there's going to be similar challenges around LGR and the Derbyshire and Staffordshire councils, and also shared services. Compass Point East in Lincolnshire, where the withdrawal of Boston left East Lindsey and South Holland geographically separated. And of course, there's the anxiety of the decoupling. There's the anxiety that you've already experienced of bringing councils together of how do we make this more efficient, more effective? It means everybody will have something of a different job. Not everybody will have a job. Not everybody will, have something that they actually think is perfect for them, as it were. So I want to be honest in all these conversations and sort of talk about the nitty-gritty realities. Leadership capacity is going to be massively stretched. I think it's the least discussed and the most consequential risk. And of course, as leaders, your roles are up for debate and question as well. And you've got to run, in this case, 2 councils while simultaneously designing their replacements, decoupling, merging, negotiating with multiple partners involved in that, with your own future as part of the conversation. So I can see lots of risks: decision fatigue, just burnout, information flow breakdown. Not to be negative, but you talked about comms, so organizational confidence throughout all of this is critical. And I don't think this is about heroic individual leaders, although I think there'll be quite a lot of that going on. I mean, overall, opening up this topic, with all that pressure, how do you think senior leaders need to best respond to this?
Is that, I mean, you could just kind of pulled everything in there, and it just shows you what a minefield everything is. It really does. I think, but what we're calling on is, as you said, brave and honest leadership. They're the 2 things I think are key. You did hit the nail on the head. You don't necessarily need maverick leaders who are charging through at the moment, but you do need leaders that are going to be putting some of that transformation later on and making sure they drive that. But right at the moment, because of so much instability going on, which you just referred to, actually it's being that brave and honest about things. We've been very honest with our staff on all fronts about where we are in LGR, what's likely to happen based on what we know. And that's the other part. At the moment, it's sections. As you go through LGR, there are points in time. The structural change order will come in later this year for Essex. That's another important point in time. It sets out how we're going to work together. And there's going to be other points on our own journey where we can actually talk to the staff and say, this is how it's going to work, this is how it's going to be. And importantly, I think we're all aware, it's not about just that leadership, but it's also retaining the staff at the moment and actually attracting staff to the jobs that are vacant. And we will have some vacancies. And it's a very difficult sell at the minute. That's why you need that brave, that optimistic saying, look, at some point, it really will be good. It's good now, and it was when we joined the 2 partnership. But remember back then, everyone was a little bit concerned, but we led you through that. We got through it together. And I think it's that word, do it, togetherness as well. In terms of actually decision making and actually that pressure that you get from decision making constantly. We're actually going to 2 or 3 meetings daily on LGR, whether they're minor meetings, larger meetings, with the councillors, league members, or across the authorities. It's non-stop, and it's getting that rhythm in those meetings. So you know which ones you're going to, you know what you're being asked, and you know what you're going to get out of it at the end of it. Because what you don't want to be doing is going to meetings where there's nothing achieved. You want to feel like you keep moving forward. Yeah, I think it's difficult. We're, as a senior leadership team, I've got a really good leadership team, colleagues with me, a really supportive chief exec, and we're all aware how this is impacting, not just on ourselves, but on the middle management and then the staff who work for them. And it's important that we have that kind of joint front that we present to them as well as we make some of these decisions and move on. Is there an answer to decision fatigue? I don't know. I think we're only at the start of it. Our announcement was in March, and it feels like we're going 100 miles an hour already. It's a great journey to be on, but it's challenging. Just making sure that we're getting all the officers, senior officers, in one place to meet their counterparts, start those discussions. That in itself is a headache. Just making sure that happens and making sure you put your right foot forward. So they're going to work together. They're going to try and achieve something. And then you kind of departmentalize things. You've got the safe and legal, which I know you would have heard of, and many other people in LGR would have heard of. Then you've got the basic transition. You're just transitioning into the new authority. And then you're setting the bigger plans that are 4 or 5 years, well, 2, 3, 4, 5 years in the future, which is the transformation, the true transformation, where you're going to look to make some things really different and really improve, not just internally, but for the members of the public, the stakeholders that are using the service that you're trying to provide. So I think, is there an answer to it? I don't think there is. I think the resilience is within the group, and I think it's support. So making sure you've got those mechanisms within you to say, I need to talk to someone about this. I've got all these decisions. I've got the support that I need to make sure that I'm making the right decisions, or I'm actually at ability to be at my best every day. Yeah, can you be at your best every day? Let's take footballers. You know, we wonder why. Yeah, yep. You've got wonderful footballers who some days, you know, can't get knocked off the ball, score a hat trick, look like the best. Next week they walk out and they're a shadow of that player they were, because it's very difficult to maintain that rate for such a long period. So to be a footballer every week doing exactly what they want is difficult. And likewise, you know, officers coming into an office, asked about decisions, do this, to actually be right on top of your game all the time is going to prove very difficult, but it needs to be done. And it's just, how do we create that resiliency? I think it's time away from the office, work-life balance. When you are doing all this work is really important, and quality work-life balance.
A very comprehensive answer. Thank you, Greg. And I'm going to struggle to keep this to the allotted time and not go into all of those topics.
Sorry.
So no, it's really helpful and really realistic. And of course, you have got the experience of COVID and other high pressure moments. Some of the moments around Brexit, some of the moments around, you know, the Ukrainian resettlement scheme, etc., to draw on. So it's great to hear that you're also thinking about looking after yourself and colleagues and having that time away. Let me throw two themes at you and see how you want to build on them. You talked about the vacancies being very important, and I guess a lot of opportunities for junior people to step up. And in terms of you know, nobody, not even people at the peak of their, you know, Olympic, World Cup craft, etc., can be perfect at their best every single day. So I guess two interlinked themes present themselves for me. One is just the reality that you can't make all the decisions that ideally you'd like to make. So how do you prioritize? Because the cost of pretending to control everything is higher than the risk of letting go. And of course, when that pressure's on, as I think you will have seen in some of the more challenged councils around the country, the temptation is very much to pull in to become a very small inner circle project, because you're in the same meetings with the same people all the time, and it's a long debrief to try and even bring your sort of, you know, direct reports up to speed. So how do you keep how do you stop it becoming, you know, locked in, and keep the information flow broad so that more people can step up and notice the threads you've left hanging and just, you know, crack on and make decisions to fill those gaps?
I'll take the second part first, and then we'll come up back to the first part, which I may need reminding of in a minute, if that's okay. But the second part, I think it actually has its deep roots in how you set everything up, the governance and the project and program management. While that's just a structure, it does give you a structure to hold things on, and actually means that actually you don't become too insular, because it makes sure that actually, if you've got it right, you're part of the wider program, part of the bigger picture. And that actually affords, back to the communication part, when we're doing this at the moment and when we did the partnership, it was how are we communicating to the public, the other stakeholders, internally, to the staff, all levels, and making sure it's just not one kind of platform. It's going down to the service meetings, and it's going down to other areas. So we make sure we've got information in community areas where they'll congregate in the kitchen, so they know where they can actually go for information. And it's drip feeding all the time. So it's making sure they feel part of it, and it makes sure that the governance that's in place, actually all the actions are coming out. People are seeing the ones that they can, obviously, but they are seeing those actions and they're going, I feel part of that. I know what's going on. Therefore, the ability to step up actually makes it easier. If you're asking a member of staff, you know, we were doing that. can you go to that meeting? You've got the information. Can you just make sure that we're feeding into that part of it? And so they can actually feel that they're part of the bigger picture. And that's really important, to be part of the bigger picture for Brentwood or Rochford, when they've got to be part of a bigger picture for a unitary authority. And it gives them that confidence to be able to do that. And we're seeing that now. There are people who are voluntarily coming forward saying, we want to be part of that bigger picture. We want to be, in that new unitary. There are some that are very quiet in that area and just want to know that they're going to be safe or have a job. And like you said, we can't guarantee everything, but we give them the confidence of what we're doing. But they don't necessarily want to be part of that bigger picture, but they are. And the way to do that is set up the right governance in place. So you've got that in place and talk and communicate all the way through.
Yeah, great. I mean, I think you covered both of the points there, really. I was talking about keeping it open for other people to step in and acknowledging that you can't make all of the decisions. I mean, if you've managed to drip feed, communicate, open it up in that way as you go through, and that is hard because there's going to be some sensitive political conversations going on here as well, aren't there?
Even more so now at the moment. I don't know that you probably know what our landscape is. We've got new councillors coming from the reform group, both at Brentwood and at Rochford, and the one at Rochford have formed the minority administration. So they're well embedded there, and it's making sure you're taking all those members along the journey so they're all aware of what is happening, because actually we are progressing this. We are working with the other unitaries. There's nothing to say we're stopping that, but we just need to make sure they're with us on that, even though some of them don't necessarily agree with it.
You're really, Essex as a whole is almost the perfect mix of different political control, no overall control, mixes in different places and connected. You couldn't ask for a better case study, so you're certainly going to have a lot of learnings to share at the end of this process.
I will exactly what I say to my staff. I say that to all my guys here. Actually, you can take this on, because no one will have had the experiences that you're having with members, officers joining up, and they go, put that down in your CV when you go, and be confident, be really confident.
Yeah, it's going to be career defining for a lot of people. I'm just sorry that it comes at a time when all the austerity and all of the other things have been making people tired, overloaded, and all the rest. But they'll step up. The local government people always do, don't they? I'll come back to ask for your advice for people following you on the journey, as it were. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the long haul, because you can be heroic, you can be stepping up. It will be career defining, getting through this process. But we all know that the hard work doesn't actually stop at vesting. And the new council is going to inherit every unresolved weakness or thing that's been sort of held frozen because of politics, or things that you've just never been able to get to previously, but at a slightly larger scale. As well as all of the successes and all of the capabilities and all the great people, and all of the things that you've managed to do well during the transition. So what do you think? What do you want to tell people about that and your planning for it at the moment? What do you think is likely to hit the new councils hardest in general? And you talk very wisely about compartmentalising safe and legal and transformation and so on. But what are the things that you're really thinking people need to be brave enough to redesign, bite the bullet, and tackle before vesting to set them up for success?
Yeah, I think there's a few things in there. I think people will concentrate on the safe and legal. And I think that will be, because it has to be done.
Have to, yes.
It's actually making sure that we are taking a vision on what the transition stuff is, that we say, look, we're going to move that in a minute. It's not necessarily needs to do something straight away, but there's also the transformation stuff. And I think we've also not got to miss a trick that this is a great opportunity to work across Essex, not just within our unitaries. And it's important that actually the disaggregation of the county actually doesn't become disaggregation, because it's what is the default position. Let's look at some of the stuff. Where is it? IT, the DDAT stuff, the data digital and technology platforms that actually we could use across Essex rather than break them down and everyone have their own platforms or their own cyberspace. Actually, where are we working together? And that's where I think for vesting day, let's not throw everything out and say, look, we're disaggregating, mid-Essex going to look after theirs, northeast Essex theirs. Actually have a think, a really big opportunity to say, where are the things that if we came together, it would really work and be really powerful? I mean, how many councils still have, a contact centre? We're moving into AI now. I'm not saying AI is the answer to everything, but there are opportunities to use AI for the benefit of our stakeholders. And in terms of, contact centres, why do we need 3, 5 across all the regions? How many can we actually bring together and use the savings or use the money to invest back into that service to provide something bigger? And what we don't want to lose is that opportunity. And it's those opportunities that, we've got to hold on to and say, this is what we're going to look at. Why do we need to do anything different? Brentwood have a contract with Buston for our revs and bends. Very successful, works really well. Why would we cut that up because we're now going to mid-Essex? I'm not saying we are, but why would you? And actually, why are we not expanding that? And it doesn't need borders to stop that expanding. So we've got the opportunity to start thinking like that, as councils do. And I think many councils already are thinking like that and doing things.
That's great. I mean, Essex, of all places, there's been talk for years about an Essex public service body and advancement and so on. We worked on leading Greater Essex a few years ago. And it's almost because of that enormous diversity and complexity of political control and no overall control that is all the more important and may still be possible. But I think that will apply elsewhere. And I do hope. There were certain stipulations from MHCLG about things not to do, and of course there's going to be controls on spending and significant commitments during the transition period, isn't there? So for example, I understand there was, I remember from the guidance, there was severe discouragement of setting up children's trusts along the lines of the old counties, but I hope there'll be imagination and allowance of that potential as you go through that body, and obviously that a lot of that comes down to the will of the shadow authority as well, doesn't it?
No, I totally agree. And I think it is that shadow authority that comes in, but we've got to give them a steer. We've got to give them some information to work on from the get-go. So they're actually fully involved. When they actually, the year after, and it becomes the unitary, they're ready to pounce and actually start making sure that certain things happen and we get moving quite quickly. But there's really good opportunity. I always believe Essex is kind of there's lots of enterprises. There's, home of they say the white van man, coming into Essex. These people are the same people that work in the authorities. They've got the same ideas. They've got that we want to improve and better ourselves. And I think that goes throughout Essex, whether you're near the London border or you're up near Tendring and the Clacton and the coast.
Yeah, a lot of entrepreneurialism for sure. It's great to hear you thinking about drawing on that. So, to wrap us up, I've got 2 questions, Greg. We've been talking a lot about the risks and challenges. You got into some positives there. Obviously, the risks are important. But what are you most relishing about LGR? What are you most looking forward to in this very arduous marathon?
I think there's probably a few phases again. I'm looking forward to, at the moment, we're in that creative stage and bringing things together. So talking about governance, the important stuff to make sure it works. But we want to get over that as quickly as possible. We want it embedded. And then the exciting part is about, let's look at the services. What can we, safe and legal, right, let's put that to one side. What can we do now to get things started, to get things sorted, and getting the right people in a room who are actually going to be able to start making, change happen and putting plans down for the future. And then I think after vesting day, it's actually being fully immersed in that change program and actually having a wider platform. But as I said earlier, it's not just about the unitary. Where can we talk to the other unitaries about making a real difference? And if we're talking about contracts, we're bigger animals by then. The unitary is a bigger animal in terms of what it can pull and its attractiveness to the outside world in terms of contracts. And we should be able to be more dynamic, work with bigger groups, bigger contracts to create something better than what we've got at the moment. And what that is, I don't know. And I think that's the exciting part as well. We don't know what we don't know at the moment and what we can achieve. But I think together, working with the commercial side, creating better products that actually say, do you know what? The rest of the world should look up at Essex or the UK as a whole. What are they doing in that local government space? What are they doing to provide for the citizen these days moving forward?
Brilliant.
So that's what excites me.
Yeah, well, obviously you're in the Devolution Priority Programme. So apart from buying your fantastic products and services and perhaps wisdom from going through, what's a word of advice for our clients and people out there who are on the same journey but several months behind you?
I'd probably say you can never start too early. That's number one. I say take stock. Don't rush into everything all the time. You end up in 100 miles an hour doing things. Take a deep breath. Look at the wider picture. Keep doing that to remind yourself what you're trying to achieve at the end of the day, because you can get bogged down into the minutiae. It's just one of those animals that pulls you into certain rabbit holes and you're looking at things. Take your head back out of there sometimes. Collaborate. Everyone wants to achieve the best. Every unitary officer that I'm working with is actually trying to produce something that's good for the new unitary. And I think they're the kind of advice. Just take stock, keep a view of the wider platform, and make sure you communicate everything you're doing all the way through.
Little echo there of Vanilla Ice. Stop, collaborate, and listen, which I really appreciate. Thank you so much. Well, exactly. Me too. Yeah. I just rang a bell. Greg, it's been fantastic talking to you as I knew it would be. I look forward to sharing this with everybody else out there. And thank you so much for being so generous with your time.
Thank you, Benjamin. Much appreciated. Pleasure.